I think we should start saying, I'm going to the mission.
That may also change. The big celebration we tend to get ourselves involved in December. Christ, Mass.
Right.
I don't know if that's the derivative where they got the word Mass from, because people always think Christmas. Well, it's Christ.
It is. The word, and this is going to be part of the Mary Deconstructed Christmas, so you're anticipating it. But the word Christmas itself, let's just go there right now. No problem.
Early at the end of the movie.
The word Christmas itself, and you'll hear this again in December 11th, is Christ's Mass. It is the Mass of Christ's nativity. So the word itself means it's Christ's Mass. Okay? And it is better, actually, and I would prefer this, is to give it its original title. Before we called it Christmas or Christ's Mass even, it was called the Feast of the Incarnation, which is what we're really celebrating. This mystery, the mystery of the Incarnation, God becoming a human being and walking and talking among us. And this is the Mass in which it occurred, in which it happened. That is a more accurate, a better understanding of it. It's just like January 1st. I don't like what we call January 1st, the Solemnity of Mary. I love our Blessed Mother, but I much prefer the original title of the feast. It's another feast day that's gotten lost in the shuffle of how things have modernized. What is January 1st? It's the feast of the circumcision. It's the feast of the circumcision. What difference does that make? It makes a big difference. It's the day in which Jesus first shed his blood for our redemption. That's why we go to Mass on January 1st. Because it's 8 days after Christmas. Yes. 8 days. You ever wonder why it's a holy day? Why is New Year's Eve a holy day of obligation? Who cares? It's the new year. I'll tell you why we should care. It's because it's the day that Jesus first shed his blood for us. That's why we go. I've said it before, but it's worth saying again, as always. The early fathers of the church spoke highly of this feast. They said that the blood that Jesus shed on his circumcision was more than enough to cover the sins of the world. That's how precious the blood of Christ is. He shed enough blood then to cover all of our sins for all time. That's why we honor it. Because people have to wonder, well, I'm hungover from the night before. Why do I have to go to Mass? Well, for one, you shouldn't be hungover, honey. All right, so let's just start there. All right? But here's another way of looking at it. In old pagan calendars, the first day of the new year begins on one of the apexes of the cycle of the sun around the cycle of the earth around the sun. In other words, spring, summer, winter, or fall. Those are the high points of the solar year. The vernal equinox, the day in which the day and the night are equal in the springtime. The autumnal equinox, when the day and night are of equal length in the autumn. The longest day of the year, which is summer, and the shortest day of the year, which is winter. Those are the highlights of the year in a pagan calendar. Almost always a new year would begin in the spring or the high points of one of those days. Why do we celebrate the new year in the middle of winter? Because we placed the birth of Christ on December 25th, and 8 days after that, we celebrate his circumcision. So the whole world marks our New Year's based on when Jesus was circumcised. Boy, tell that to your atheist friends. See how they spin their heads around. What? And that's exactly when we do it. The whole world follows this idea because it makes no sense in terms of solar year calendars. We really should celebrate our new year at the first day of spring because that's the beginning of the newness of life after a long winter. It's also the day in which it's equal day and night. It's the perfect even tone day. Most pagan celebrations occur either at that point or at the point in between summer and fall, at the feast of what's called Samhain, okay? Well, which typically falls on November 1st in pagan calendars. Why? Because it marks the transition from summer into fall. So that's when they pick that. So the point is, why do we have such an offbeat way of celebrating a new year? It's because it's all centered on Jesus. All of it is centered on Jesus. Whether you believe in him or not is unimportant. The whole world follows this calendar. The whole world. Whether you're an atheist, whether you're a Hindu, whether you're a Jew, whether you're a Protestant, it doesn't matter. This is how we celebrate it. And why do we celebrate it? Because it is 8 days after Christmas. We celebrate the time in which he first shed his blood for our salvation. Amen? Amen. I saw that hand, Gina.
I thought that you were the one that had mentioned a few years ago that the reason why they put Christmas where they placed Christmas was so that it could be disguised in one of the pagan rituals, like a several-day feast day in September, the Sagittarius or something.
Okay.
Is that right?
Close. You're warned.
Kind of like, so they wouldn't be persecuted. It ended up everybody was sort of celebrating. It actually flipped, and everybody was starting to celebrate Christ versus the other way around.
In ancient Rome, the Romans were pagans. They celebrated the old pagan calendar in which they celebrated all of these feasts. A way to think about it is like a circle. So you would have, I believe this began March 22nd, which is your spring. So that's your spring equinox. Then from spring, you go into summer. So this would be June 22nd. This is your summer solstice. Then from there, you go into September 22nd, which is your autumnal equinox. Now, what's an equinox? I keep mentioning this. An equinox. Equa means equal. Nox means night. Means equal night. Means when in the in the northern hemisphere, it's when the day and the night are of equal length. You have just as much daylight as you have nighttime. When you get to June 22nd, you have far more daylight than you have night. It's what we call the longest day of the year. You have more daylight than you have nighttime. Now, when you go from September 22nd to December 22nd, what do you get? you get the winter solstice. This is the shortest day of the year. Notice how dark it is outside.
Longer nights.
You have the longest night and the shortest day on this time. Now it's interesting, when do we celebrate Christmas? December 25th. It's around the time that's the shortest day of the year, when there's mostly darkness. Because from this point forward, the days will slowly start to get longer until we hit spring, when they are equal length. And then they get even longer as we go towards the summer. Then they start to get shorter again until they're equal again, and on we go. Pagans, even neo-pagans and Wiccans nowadays, celebrate these cycles, and these are holy times of their year, because they are the nature's cycles. And these have been recognized since probably prehistoric times. But in Roman times, at the time of Jesus, each one of these were major feast days that were celebrated usually with some sort of orgy. Because that was just how pagans celebrate these feast days. They have a big party and they have an orgy. I mean, it just is. And so on December 22nd, this was usually what they call, let me see if I remember correctly, Sol Invictus, which means the sun inviting. You're inviting the sun back because it's going away. You're noticing the days are shorter and the nights are longer. It's like the sun is going away. So on the shortest day of the year, you have a feast in honor of Saturn, which is where we get the word Saturnalia from. So the feast that the Romans would have would be a Saturnalia in honor of the god Saturn at this time, because he was the god of the pantheon, of the Olympians. And so you were invoking him to bring back the life into the world again. Because darkness was covering the earth, and you wanted to invite the light back. And so you would invoke the god Saturn in what's called a Saturnalia. Well, this is now, in our common parlance, a synonym for an orgy. And that's how the Romans would celebrate it. Okay? In trying to evoke more fertility during the darkest days of the year. And then what would happen? Well, the sun would come back and would slowly get longer and longer until you hit spring. Okay? So, some have speculated that the early church, to counterbalance this paganism, created the Feast of the Incarnation at this time. Because if you think about it symbolically, Jesus is the light of the world. And when the earth was at its darkest, right? What happened? Jesus is born. And what happens? Light comes back. And so many have speculated that the early church started celebrating Christ's birth at December 25th as a way to counter the pagan idea with a Christian idea of Jesus coming into the world, light overshining darkness, the real light of the world. Does that make sense? Yes. And I think that that's where it comes from, because it's certainly not in our Gospels. Okay? Yes?
I don't think it passed, but I'm just curious. How much of this do we know went into the thoughts of whoever proposed the amendment to switch our time? Did you vote for it?
Oh, that! Oh yeah, daylight savings time. That was one of the amendments that passed. But we're not going to see any changes for a while. They have to petition the federal government for that.
So it did pass.
Yeah.
So my question is,
Well, no, it's going to be years before we.
If any, yeah. Yeah. Personally, I think we should give up daylight savings because it's a hangover from the 18th century. It was Benjamin Franklin who first introduced the idea of daylight savings, and it was meant to help encourage agriculture. Because back in the 18th century, you didn't have bright lights. And so when the sun went down, guess what? You went to sleep. Because there was no lights. And when you didn't turn on the lights like we have now, if we turned on all the lights, this place would be pitch dark. You know? Well, back in the 18th century, at the time of the writing of the Declaration of Independence, people didn't have a lot of lights. Yeah, they had candles and stuff like that, but I mean, those were expensive. You don't want to burn candles. If it's dark, you go to bed. Yeah. Well, because of this, because there are 2 times in the year when the days are longer and the nights are longer, you want to adjust so that you get the maximum amount of work out of people. So daylight savings was invented in order that when it comes the spring, you have more daylight. So you change the time, and in the fall, you have less daylight, so you change it back. Well, this has no meaning for us now because we have electric lights, people, it's meaningless. So I personally have the opinion that we should just give up and just go with one time and forget all this time changing stuff. It drives me nuts anyway. You know. But that's off over here. We can thank Chris for that bunny trip. But this is how ancient people marked the days and the seasons. And they honored these with special gods and feast days. All right? Because these are the major changes of our experience. If we lived in the country, we would probably have a lot more of awareness of this than we do in the city because of the lights and everything that cloud it out. All right? So, that was a long-winded discussion over one question. Let's see. What time is it? Oh, you're right. I was looking at it, it's like, it looked like we still had 15 minutes, but that's, I'm looking at this, we're out of time. And it's dark out, yeah. Remember, next week, we do not have Bible study. Please enjoy your Thanksgiving break with your family and friends.
Have a good Thanksgiving to
Thank you.
enjoy your
You're very welcome.